So like I mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about doubt. And of course, we use the word doubt in a lot of different ways in the English language. In court, we talk about a reasonable doubt or beyond a shadow of a doubt. And in relationships, we might talk about giving someone the benefit of the doubt. In intellectual circles, we might talk about seeds of doubt that get planted. But, you know, for people of faith, when we talk about doubt, we're often referring to that unsettling experience, that doubt that can sometimes initiate entertaining questions that can be frightening or disturbing. Doubt can sound like questions like, is God real? Is he in control? Do I have what it takes? Am I good enough? What if all of this is made up? And so, like I said, the title of my sermon is Some Truth About Doubt. Some Truth About Doubt. And when we're done, we will have looked at 3 things that I think are true about doubt. And then we'll close with some practical advice for navigating, all right? So, here we go. The first truth about doubt is that doubt is normal. Doubt is normal. So for all the apprehension and stigma that we have for lacking confidence in certain beliefs, I think doubt is surprisingly common. There was a study done in 2017 by the Barna Group, and it surveyed American Christians, and it found that more than 2/3 admitted to experiencing doubt at some point in their lives. And in fact, at the time of the survey, more than 1/4 of them said that they continually experience doubt. But, you know, beyond research surveys, just a casual look through the scripture should help us to realize that doubt is common. Just think about the book of Psalms alone. Psalm 77 reads in part, "Will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion?" Psalm 89, then, "You said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to my servant David. But you have rejected. You have spurned. You have renounced the covenant with your servant and have defiled his crown in the dust. Lord, where is your former great love in which your faithfulness you swore to David?" Psalm 88, "Why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me?" And then it closes, "You have taken me friend and neighbor, and darkness is my closest friend." And then, of course, Psalm 22, those words that Jesus himself said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" You know, erasing doubt from the scriptures, erasing doubt from the Christian walk would be to erase it from the scriptures themselves, and even to erase it from the life of Jesus. From Jeremiah to Jesus, from Sarah to Saul of Tarsus, from Ezekiel to Esther, the scriptures are filled with stories about people who demonstrate great and profound faith, and also who struggle with doubt. These inspired records testify that to be human is to dance with uncertainty. Too often, I think we find ourselves imagining that doubt is some kind of moral failure. I love what Barbara Brown Taylor observes about the experience of the prophet Ezekiel. She writes, "There was no hiding of the divine face from Ezekiel. He both saw and heard it. But the privilege of that full revelation did not include words to describe it. His accounts are packed with something like, not exactly like. His vision exceeds his ability to say it more with the language that he has. He will not trespass upon the silence of God. There are things that no mortal should say, even if one sees them and is allowed to live through them." So even for a prophet, some doubt, some mystery remains. Ellen White writes in her chapter on doubt from the wonderful book, Steps to Christ, "If it were possible for created beings to attain a full understanding of God and his works, then, having reached that point, there would be for them no further discovery of the truth, no growth in knowledge, no further development of mind or heart. God would no longer be supreme, and man, having reached the limit of knowledge and attainment, would cease to advance. Let us thank God that this is not so. God is infinite," she writes. "In him are all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, and to all eternity men may ever be searching, ever learning, and yet never exhaust the treasures of his wisdom, his goodness, and his power." This is from page 110. And so first, if you find yourself just now in this moment, if you find yourself in a season of troubling doubt, if you're struggling with aspects of your faith, if you're struggling with confusion about God's will perhaps, or maybe religious affiliation, if you're feeling insecure about parenting choices or jobs or moves or changes or finances, if you're sick, if you're struggling with sin, or you feel like a pariah for whatever reason, if you've been asking whether God is alive or if he's in control, if you've been asking if you're good enough, if you take nothing else from this conversation and sermon, I hope that you take this: you are not alone. So that's the first. Doubt is normal. Doubt is normal. The second one is that doubt is a problem. Doubt is no fun. It's no fun at all. And that's the problem with doubt. What does it feel like to experience doubt? Well, when we lose someone we love, when we go through to a disease or to an accident, when we lose a relationship or a job, when we suffer in depression, doubt can feel like fear. It can feel like this anxious discomfort where what once felt safe no longer feels trustworthy, and what is unknown begins to cast shadows on all the things that we used to rely upon. When we are victimized and made to feel powerless, when we go through trauma, doubt can feel like shame. It can lead us to question whether or not we belong, if we're good enough, if we have what it takes. This kind of doubt is the kind that can stick with us for decades. It's the kind that can cause us to question our very identity. Sometimes when we consider doubts in the context of religious circles, sometimes doubt can feel like loneliness or isolation. Some of us all know all too well that if we express some questions or dilemmas in the wrong settings, it can produce consequences that are painful. And so for a lot of us, especially for those of us who are believers, even though doubt is common, we tend to keep our doubts hidden or secret. I asked my Facebook friends not too long ago about how they experience doubt, what it feels like for them when they go through doubt. And many responded in public comments, but you wouldn't believe how many sent me private messages because they only felt comfortable saying it in private with all kinds of insightful reflections. And, I wouldn't want to place motives on my friends' reasons for responding the way they did, but I couldn't help but wonder if for them they had been burned in the past by sharing their doubts in places that weren't safe. And, in my experience as a pastor, sometimes church doesn't really feel like a safe place when we're struggling. And so for some of us, we can tend to keep those questions well hidden, tucked away, and it can lead us to feeling isolated or lonely. So there's two truths about doubt, right? Two truths about doubt. And now here's the third before we get to the practical advice. Doubt is very often our friend. In fact, I think that doubt is often an essential ingredient in reaching maturity. I think doubt can sometimes be the catalyst for the best kinds of changes. We see this dynamic sometimes come to life when people hit rock bottom, as we sometimes say. Whether it's in an abusive or dysfunctional relationship or financial crises or someone who's going through an addiction or a serious illness, sometimes when the situation gets bad enough, people start to doubt the status quo, begin to ask questions. Could it be better than this? Is this really all there is? Is this normal? 4 or 5 years ago, I got to that place with my own personal health. I had gone through some trauma as a kid, as a child, and I learned to use food, of one of many things, to cope with that, and my weight had climbed quite high, over 300 pounds, and I felt poorly physical. I had starting to have trouble getting around. I was having a hard time playing with my kids, and I started to have fears about my longevity, about future possible illnesses. And so I started asking questions about what the best path forward was for me. And, for me, hitting rock bottom, as it was, or doubting the status quo, if you will, it changed my life for the better. Had I been unwilling to go through the humbling experience of facing my brokenness and accepting help, I don't think it would be possible for me to be who I am and where I am today. Doubt is very often good for us. I think it's true for individuals, but I think it can also be true for organizations and even cultures as well. Think about James White or Ellen White, Uriah Smith, William Miller, and the other pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist movement. Think about them. What would have happened if they had stopped ignoring, or they stopped ignoring their lingering questions about solidified Christian teachings on subjects like the eternally burning hell and Sabbath and the nature of evil, and when they stopped ignoring those questions, I believe the world became a better place. We're here having this conversation in this studio in part because of the doubts that those pioneers had and expressed. Just last fall, in October, many around the world celebrated and reflected on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. The day that Martin Luther nailed those 95 theses to the doors of the Wittenberg Church, had Luther not expressed those doubts of the prevailing theology of his time, had he chosen to not explore the cracks of the system that he had inherited and once embraced, the church and even the world would not be what it is today. We can go as far back or even farther than Peter, the disciple, who, full of confidence in his faith system that explicitly excluded the unholy, unclean, non-Jews, he initially rejected the doubt that God gave him by way of a dream. You remember the story in the book of Acts. A sheet full of unclean animals in his dream is spread before him, and in the dream God tells him to kill and to eat, to break the ritual purity rules that he had followed for a lifetime. And in the dream he says, "No, I could never do that." In Acts chapter 10, you can read it yourself. He says, "My Lord, I have never had anything to do with anything unclean." The very idea was anathema to Peter. He couldn't fathom a faith system that would allow him to eat pork, let alone a faith system that included outsiders to follow Jesus, which was what the point of the dream was. But the dream, now get this, a dream, not conversation, not Bible study, not ecclesiastical debate, not denominational consensus. A dream creates a God-ordained kernel of doubt in his mind. How unsettling. And I believe that doubt was holy. And once it germinated and grew, the doubt changed the direction of the Christian way and of the planet. And so then the third truth about doubt becomes clear as we go through the dark valley of doubt. Not only are we never the first people to sojourn there, But as we're struggling through it, we can safely trust that something beautiful and new might just be around the corner. So what do we do then? What do we do then with doubt in the meantime? What do we do then? How do we make our way through this troubling, unpleasant experience without succumbing to paralyzing despair or the sins of certainty? Well, to answer that question, I have some questions for you. What's the opposite of summer? Winter, yeah. The opposite of happy? Sad, right? The opposite of dogs? Cats. Cats are the opposite of dogs. The opposite of fasting? Feasting. Feasting is the opposite of fasting. The opposite of young? Oh, we have the opposite of chocolate. The opposite of chocolate, did you know? The opposite of chocolate is disappointment. Disappointment, yes, the opposite of chocolate is disappointment. And what is the opposite of doubt? I'll tell you, friends, the opposite of doubt is not faith. The opposite of doubt is not faith, but certainty. Doubt is to faith what fear is to courage. You can't be brave unless you're also afraid, and you can't have faith unless you also have doubt. Walking forward in trust, despite doubt, is a dance, a give and take, a holy interplay. You know, when we read the 4 biographies of Jesus' life, known as the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we do hear Jesus offering some strident opinions and demonstrations, but very often he leaves us with all sorts of lingering questions. He explains concepts in stories and parables, not so much in propositional statements. He gives half answers and little samples. He says, I have so many things I wish I could tell you, but you're not ready to hear them. That's from John 16. Jesus' goal, obviously, isn't that we would know everything perfectly, but that even though we see life as though reflected in a dim mirror, to use the words from the Apostle Paul, we would still rely on the one we trust. You know, as an Adventist church, we teach righteousness by faith, not righteousness by certitude. I believe that doubt is unavoidable for those who want to grow on the journey of Christian discipleship. And I think it's possible to walk through it with courage. We might not have perfect answers, but I think we have enough to trust. I want to close with a short story. A year or so ago, my youngest son started preschool. And, he began attending, and while eventually he came to love the experience and enjoy it with all his heart, at first it was a little bit more touch and go, as you might expect. I remember dropping him off that first Monday, and I could sense his anxiety building on the drive over. He could tell that it was, it was a new place, and there were new people, and there would be new rules. And let's just be honest, he had his doubts about whether or not it was a good idea. Now, I could have responded to my son. I could have responded to his doubt by explaining all the details about this preschool. I could tell him about how it was certified by the state and how they had snacks and playtime and lots of great toys. I could have told him about how the teachers had gone to school and they had bachelor's degrees and they were certified real teachers, and that there was a great ratio of teachers to students in the room, and they had plenty of time outside and inside. And I could tell him all that. I could tell him how safe and wonderful it was going to be. I could give him all the facts. But we all know that wouldn't have helped his doubt. That wouldn't have soothed his concern. And so I started reminding him that after just a couple of hours, his grandma would be coming to pick him up. Grandma's coming to pick you up. You're going to stay here for a little while. You're going to stay here and play, but then Grandma's coming to pick you up. Grandma's coming to pick you up. Grandma's coming to pick you up. And then he started to repeat it after me. Grandma's coming to pick me up. Grandma's coming to pick me up. Grandma's coming to pick me up. And I could see him calm right in the moment. You know, it's perfectly okay, I think, to ask questions what, why, and how. It's perfectly okay. But I think a better question to ask is who? Is who? Jesus is coming to pick you up. Jesus is coming to pick you up. You might not know what's going to happen in the meantime. You might make mistakes. You might screw up. You don't know all the ways that it will shake out. It might take a lot longer than you would have liked, but Jesus is coming to pick you up. He said it. If I go, I will come back. You're not alone. I'm just around the corner. Would you pray with me? Dear Jesus, you promised that you would be with us until the very end, through our doubts and all. And right now we wait, and we have all kinds of questions, and we see life as through that dirty window. We have confusion, and sometimes it's scary, and sometimes it feels shameful. Sometimes we feel like we're the only ones. I pray that you walk with each one of us, that we might trust you in even a small way. We might trust you enough to put one foot in front of our feet, or to talk to someone we love about what we're going through, or even to whisper a prayer just now. Give us the faith to trust you. I pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
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 When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.